Welcome back to the channel. This is the Action Figure Grader, and we're going to take a look today at the vintage collection. But this is going to be a little different than usual, okay? Because I want to talk about two posts by Yakface on Instagram and maybe relate that to whatever you collect and just kind of get your thoughts on it. So if you're leaving a like for this video, I'd also appreciate some comments on maybe a little bit of a discussion topic. And then we'll get into some recent sales for the vintage collection. Lots of big items sold, some Canadian examples, graded examples, the Mouse Droid, Salacious Crumb, lots of really good stuff there. All right, first let's talk about Yakface. So he had a post on Instagram, and it says, "It's been a long time coming, but I'm finally joining the No Pre-Orders Club going forward for all Hasbro Star Wars announcements. I don't really understand how Hasbro, and by extension their retail partners, can continue to be so off the mark with estimated arrival dates. Orders continue to process months earlier than initial solicitations, press releases state, and with the possibility of another $500 TVC HasLab dropping at any time. For me and others, the barrage has become untenable. I'll be switching to in-stock only purchases for the foreseeable future." And he says, this is a key here, "Judging by the large drop in pre-orders that he's seen through his affiliate links, there must be a lot of people doing the same thing or pulling back altogether for various reasons." So, a lot to take in there. And for those of you that collect the vintage collection, first, do you guys stop pre-orders? Obviously, the HasLab's its own animal. And I know you guys that collect the HasLab stuff, you're going to pre-order that. You have to. But what about all of the new mint on card kind of announcements and the pre-orders that are happening? He doesn't even touch on this, but not to mention there are several retailers over the last year and a half, both in the UK as well as in the US, that have gone out of business, and buyers have not gotten their pre-order money back. Dorkside Toys comes to mind over here, and I know there was one over in the UK. The name escapes me. So that's a whole nother risk of buying pre-orders. But are you guys still pre-ordering stuff religiously because you're a completionist and you have to get your new pre-orders done because you're not, you don't want to have to deal with finding them on the secondary market or stuff that's in stock? Or is there just too much and you don't pre-order anything anymore? Or is it some combination thereof based on what the figure is and if it's somebody that you really want? Now, he says, judging by the large drop in pre-orders, other people are doing the same thing, or they're pulling back for other reasons. And I think that's a key to me, because I think personally, people are pulling back, period, on collecting Star Wars action figures. We've seen some kind of middling prices at Hakes. We're seeing middling to lower prices on eBay for vintage Kenner stuff. We're obviously seeing a lot lower prices for the vintage collection. Part of it, I think, is maybe economic concerns. There's a lot of people that are struggling right now to make ends meet with the higher inflation environment that we're not only seeing here in the U.S., but I'm sure overseas in Europe too. So I think that might be part of it. People are just tightening their belt strings, and these kind of discretionary, unnecessary purchases that we make in collectibles, people are just pulling back. Now, the other question is the Star Wars franchise just in kind of a down state right now? I think the argument can be made that is the case, is that Star Wars is kind of at a trough. You got peaks and valleys. I kind of feel like we're in a valley right now. People in general are very negative on Star Wars as a franchise, even if you go to the comic book world, where maybe it's not just people who are Star Wars fans buying these things. It's true comic collectors only. Every Star Wars comic is dead in the water. Everything is really down right now, except for Star Wars 1, but even that one has pulled back a little bit. So I think it's a combination of a number of factors. People don't want to have surprise pre-orders drop on their lap. Yes, I agree with that. Obviously, the HasLab's coming, so people are maybe pulling back there. But I do think it's broader economic concerns. It's maybe just people are not really happy with the Star Wars franchise as a whole right now. So I think there's a lot to take in there, a lot to unpack, and I'd be curious to know your thoughts on that. And he says, remember the rules at the end of this. And this is a kind of a pinned post on Yakface's Instagram. Collecting, my thoughts. Number one, buy what you like, pass on what you don't. Number two, natural selection will weed out the things that are not successful. Truly successful toy lines endure because of character selection, quality, and value. Value being a key word there, given the recent price increases over at the Vintage Collection. Faltering in any one of those three areas can lead to apathy and spending our shrinking dollars elsewhere. And I think that's what's going on right now, personally. Apathy for the Star Wars franchise as a whole, maybe some apathy for the Vintage Collection as a whole, as a specific line. And obviously, shrinking dollars is a real thing right now. We've had massive inflation over the last year and a half or more. And number three, I think this is a good one. Don't take this hobby so seriously as where it's not fun anymore, as to where it's not fun and more of a chore. That's a really good idiom that I personally aspire to, or I aspire my collecting, my quote unquote investing in various collectibles. I try not to take this thing so seriously. And if you guys follow my channel long enough, you know I don't take it that seriously. I call them little plastic dolls, and I don't view these as investments for the most part. I view them as a side hobby. And people that view it as investments, I think that there's a big risk there, especially when you're focused on one specific franchise like Star Wars. And more on that note, before I forget, I'm recording a Q&A session with a gentleman named Sean, who runs a great collectibles finance channel that's way bigger than mine, called Reserved Investments. I've talked about his channel in the past, and I reached out to him, and he said, yeah, sure, I'd love to come on your channel. I'm not going to do it a live stream because I have some set questions that I want to do, and given our schedules, it's very hectic, and I want to really dig into some specific questions I have about collectibles finance and investing, quote unquote, in collectibles, and maybe just some broader economic questions as it ties into collectibles prices. So we're going to record it, I think, Friday evening, and I'm going to release it Saturday, June 1st. So be sure to tune into that. And if you're not a subscriber to Sean over at Reserved Investments, you need to. You need to, especially if you're putting big money into a lot of this stuff. If you're putting big boy money into any kind of collectibles, I highly recommend Reserved Investments as a channel because he tells it like it is. He keeps it real. And probably what he says in my Q&A session might upset a few of you guys that really invest heavily in this stuff. And it's kind of a word, this video is going to be kind of a word of warning to those of you that really invest in this stuff and view this as a true investment. There's a lot of risks associated with collectibles investment, and I want to really dig into that with Sean. So he's been very gracious to join my very small channel. He's got a massive 17,000 subscriber channel, and he's given me an hour of his time. So I'm looking forward to that, and I'll probably, like I said, release it June 1st as a pre-recorded Q&A session. So I hope you'll tune in for that. All right, so let's dig into some vintage collection. I know that was a big kind of lead up, but it's kind of a two-part video. First, the discussion from Yakface and his collecting thoughts, which I really enjoy seeing that, and then announcing the live stream. But now it's time to dig into some sales here. Power Droid, we're going to come back to him at the end of this video when I cover some of the graded gems that he had for sale. He had some beauties that sold for big boy money. He always tends to get big boy money for his items because he just has a never-ending well of high-grade TVC 1.0 unpunched, stunning condition. So here was a VC16 Obi-Wan, unpunched, and it looked pretty much perfect, as most of his items are. That one sold for $300 in a buy-it-now situation, and we'll get back to him in a little bit. Here was a punched example of the Clone Trooper 212th Battalion, VC38, and it looked to be pretty clean, other than the fact that it was punched versus unpunched. That one sold for $115. Interesting sale there. Speaking of very interesting sales, here's one that comes up on eBay maybe 3 times a year total. This is the very tough to find European release of Dr. Aphra VC129, and you can see that it's got the blank no warning stick or no warning kind of box in the upper right hand corner on the back, and then on the top right, excuse me, on the front, and then on the back it's got the multi-language warning. And so this is a very, very rare extremely tough to find mint on card. And again, I've seen a few examples sell over the years that we've covered on the channel. The last one top of mind that I remember, and I'm sure some Patreons like Mark C., a few of the other vintage collection experts from the Facebook groups that I am a member of, I'm sure they can tune in or chime in with some extra data points. But to me, the last one I vaguely remember selling was around $600 or $700 for one of these, ungraded. And this one was ungraded. It was not in mint condition. So let's keep that in mind, is that it did have a decent amount of edge wear on the bottom, on the back. You can see there some light edge wear to it. So it was not perfect by any means. And maybe that reflects in the final sales price. But this one did have 10 bids with a starting price of 350 pounds. Or a final sales price of 350 pounds, excuse me. And that equates to $445 US dollars. Now, to get it shipped to the US, that would have been another $60. So let's call that $500 versus the last sale, which in my mind was a much more mint example. Just going on memory again, it was between $600 and $700 that it sold for. So this is truly a very, very rare item for a modern vintage collection TVC 2.0. But I wanted to show that one because I found that one in the closed listings. And I know Mark C., a Patreon supporter and friend of mine, he's got one of these, and a few others, I'm sure, that watch my channel have this. So I let them kind of chime in the comments, if you don't mind, with some other maybe data points for those out there looking. I was looking for a long time on this one because I do love Dr. Aphra. I've kind of given up on the vintage collection. I just don't have the space or the patience to deal with all the new orders and things like that. So I kind of gave up looking for one of these. But that is a beauty. And I'll be curious to know some other data points on purchase prices for that. Next up here is a European release for VC 102 Ahsoka. And I mean, the mighty have fallen. And this will probably be a topic that I bring up with Sean in Reserved Investments, is investing, quote unquote, in modern collectibles and the risks associated with that. VC 102 Ahsoka is a perfect example of that. And if you'll remember, there were some graded examples of VC 102, US card, unpunched, beauty, AFA 90s, CAS 90s that were selling during the height of Ahsoka mania during the collectibles bubble for $1,800 US dollars. $1,800. Here we have a near mint plus example of the European release, and it sold only on one bid for $125 plus $25 shipping. So let's call that $150. So, this was a $700-800 item minimum during the height of collectibles boom. And one of the major risks associated with buying anything modern. And it's just something to keep in mind that there's a lot of risk there if you start paying big boy money for some of these modern items. And this is definitely a good example of that. Next up, this seller is one I covered in my What to Buy video that, hey, if you like alternate cards, foreign cards, multi-language name pills, this seller had a bunch going in auction that I wanted to point out. So this is the Hasbro Canada foil example of Han Solo Echo Base outfit. And you can see the multi-language name pill there. How cool is that? Very clean example. That one sold for 86 Canadian dollars, which is 63 US dollars. So pretty good deal there. He also had an unpunched Canadian Rats Terriel and Pit Droid from the Phantom Menace, and again, a very clean example, Canadian card back. You can see the multi-language on the back there. VC77, that one sold for 65 Canadian dollars, which is about 48 US bucks. So not too crazy there. Here's one that I had no idea what it was going to go for. For the longest time, this was like $300. That's about what I paid for mine when I still owned it. I don't own it anymore. But this is the multi-language Canadian name pill Rebel Soldier Echo Base Battle Gear version. And you can see there, it's got a lot of language going on that name pill. Very tough to find this one, unpunched especially. This one sold for 265 Canadian, which is almost 200 US dollars. I mean, I could have seen it selling for 100. I could see it selling for 300. I had no idea. It kind of fell right in the middle there at $200. So very nice example, and just kind of gives you a data point for those of you looking. It's not as rare as the Euro VC 129 Dr. Aphra. That's not as rare as that, but this one is tough to find. It's a tricky one to track down, but a very cool Canadian example there with that multi-language name pill. Same seller also had the VC64 Return of the Jedi version of Princess Leia in her slave outfit. That one sold for 350 Canadian on one bid, which is 256 US dollars. Pretty good price there. I didn't look too closely to see how clean it was, but it looks fairly clean based on the quick glance at the photos. Here was the US release for the Revenge of the Jedi Princess Leia VC64. This is the true offerless example. No paperwork inside the blister. It was not mint. You can see some scuffing by the Return of the Jedi logo. That one still sold for almost $300. So interesting there. To me, I'm just saying for me, if I had my choice between one with scuffs, that was the US card, admittedly from the SDCC Death Star box set, versus this one that looked a little bit cleaner and was the much more difficult to find Canadian example unpunched, I'd probably lean towards the Canadian example just because there's fewer of these manufactured versus even the SDCC box set. That's my guess. I have no idea if that's true or not. I could be wrong on that. It could be more of these out there. I just feel like they're harder to find relative to the Revenge of the Jedi offer list from the SDCC box set. Next up, we got some graded items I wanted to go through before I talk about the Mouse Droid and Salacious Crumb that sold. Here was an uncirculated ARC Trooper 5s gold level. That one sold for $60. Basically, grading costs once you factor in shipping to and from AFA. That's a pretty good deal there. Here was Ray Island Journey 9.0 gold level. That one sold for $127.50. This was a Walmart exclusive and very interesting to see that one. And this one also has the Hong Kong import sticker on the back. And that was noted by AFA, which I had not seen before. And I didn't notice that when I showed this in my What to Buy video. But it says on the label, Walmart exclusive HK Hong Kong sticker. So they do note on the labels, on the AFA labels, that it is the Hong Kong distribution sticker on the back of this card back. So it's weird how some of them have it, some of them don't. It's hard to explain, but that one did have it. $127.50 on that one. Here was a reissue for Princess Leia Organa Hoth. This is VCO2, but obviously the reissue from 2019. Also a 9.0 gold level. That one sold for $77, so a very reasonable price there. Here was the 2020 re-release for the Clone Trooper 9.0 uncirculated designation. That one sold for $86. So again, very reasonable prices, basically a little bit above the cost to grade them. This was a beauty. This was an uncirculated 9.25 Walmart exclusive, the wider Mando and Grogu from Maldo Kreese. And so that's very tough to get in an uncirculated designation because it's a Walmart exclusive. So this seller, Disruptor, is a very trusted seller. You can buy from him with confidence. He is a Patreon supporter. And just wanted to make sure to get his name out there because he always has a lot of really good, high-grade, modern inventory for sale. So check out Disruptor on eBay, and you can buy with confidence from him. But he did sell this one, 9.25 uncirculated, $250 was the winning, or was the offer accepted on that one. Now we're going back to Power Droid, and he had yet another batch of TVC 1.0 unpunched in high grade. I don't know. It just seems to have a never-ending supply of these. He's been selling these for years, and it just never ends. But he did have this beauty. This was a 9.0 Anakin Skywalker. This one had the Darth Vader name pill, and it was unpunched, so you knew it was going to go for a lot of money. He had it listed for $500, and it did sell at $500 based on the eBay sales data that I saw. I know he made an offer at one point, but I don't know if someone accepted the offer or just outright paid the $500. He also had a very tough to find unpunched Magna Guard VC18. This is one of the ones mentioned by Jedi Temple Archives or Yakface that it's very tough to find this one in an unpunched example. This one along with VC04, Luke Bespin, and a few others, but this is definitely one that is highly sought after unpunched. And it was a 9.0 from AFA. That one sold for $600. And you'll remember about a year and a half ago, there was another one at auction that was an unpunched Magna Guard, and it sold for between $800 and $900. So that price was very reasonable relative to that one that sold about a year and a half ago. Next up, he also had an uncirculated 9.5 for Boba Fett, the mail-away rocket-firing Boba Fett. That one sold for $450. nice to see a pretty high price on that one, but again, it was a 9.5. Pretty much impossible to get above that grade. I mean, I would bet if you looked at the population report for this particular VCP03, I bet there's not many in a 9.5, if any at all, in a 9.75. So beautiful example. That one did sell for $450. We got a couple of gems that I wanted to point out. First, going back to that same seller, he had a VC20 Canadian Yoda with the alternate card image, unpunched, and this is one that I did have in my what to buy video. Somebody made an offer on it, and they offered 1,000 Canadian on it. It was listed with a starting bid price, or maybe a starting bid price of 1,500 Canadian. But they made an offer at 1,000 Canadian, and it was accepted. That equates to $750 US. So that was a very reasonable winning bid for an unpunched VC20 Canadian Yoda. That's the lowest price I've seen sell for one of these in a very long time, if ever. I mean, since I started really tracking these closely. So very reasonable price. The seller was very reasonable on that one. So I'm shocked he sold it that low. But that one did sell for 1,000 Canadian in a make an offer situation. Finally, we have the combo deal for the Revenge of the Jedi SDCC Death Star pack-ins, the Mouse Droid and the Salacious Crumb. Neither one of these were perfect. Both of them had quite a bit of edge wear and scuffing to them. But they were listed with a starting bid price of $900. One bid was the winning bid on that one. So $900 took those home. Again, that's a fairly low price relative to some of the others we've seen. I think we've seen a couple that have sold as high as $1,500. But again, these were not mint. And I think that's why the price was actually relatively fair versus, some of the others that have sold. So probably about 80 grade condition overall. But those two did sell, Mouse Droid and Salacious Crumb, in about 80 grade condition for $900. One bid on that one. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this kind of different video for the vintage collection and just talking about collecting in general. Sound off in the comments. Thank you as always for watching, and I'll be back soon.